So thank you all for dialing in. I am Liz Powell. I'm the head of G2G Consulting and really excited to serve as the moderator for today's congressional briefing on increasing physical safety for members of Congress, staff, police, visitors, really everyone. A lot of what you will hear today applies across the country, whether it's a business, a school, a stadium, a sports arena, all kinds of places across the country can be safer. There's now tools that can help make all of us safer. And so that's what we want you to learn today. So what we'll do is we'll start off with a video and then we'll turn to our speakers. And just to sort of give some background as people are continuing to dial in, I know that some folks have been on the Hill for quite a long time. And what happened on January 6th was not the first time. We had 9/11, we had anthrax, we had the shooting of Officer Chestnut back in 1998. So there have been other threats, unfortunately, to the Capitol. And of course, outside of the Capitol, we all know as well. And many people feel very scared in those moments and completely rely on Capitol Police to advise on what to do. And if we're relying on our Capitol Police, then we have got to give them the protection they need. Shouldn't we do everything that we can to be as secure as possible? And today is about answering those questions. What can we do to make their jobs easier in protecting those that walk the halls? There's something like 10,000 people on a typical day within the Capitol complex. And so we want to make today about learning what we can do to make it as safe as possible for our police, for us, for everyone. So with that, I will then turn it over to our video. We've got a nice short 3-minute video. And then we will go to Congressman Dave Joyce. We're very pleased to have him join, and then the rest of our panelists of experts. So we'll start with the video. Thank you for that video that sort of captures a lot of the history when it comes to our safety. And so this gives you the agenda of what we're going to cover today. We're going to start with Congressman Dave Joyce, and then we've got several different experts in all the tools that are available as far as ballistics and resistant impact materials and options that are available, and amazing background from the military to the police. So they will each introduce themselves before they speak. And so now I'd love to introduce Congressman Dave Joyce, who is a wonderful congressman. I've known him for several years, very passionate about doing everything he can to make a difference, to be just the quintessential member of Congress. Really works as hard as he can to address many different issues. Very passionate about Great Lakes, which we appreciate, but also about working together and wants obviously everyone to be as safe as they can. So a great leader in Congress, great for the state of Ohio, which I feel strongly about, but also great for the nation. So we'd love to turn it over to Congressman Dave Joyce.
Good morning, everyone, and I'd like to thank all of you for joining us today, and a shout out to Liz, a very powerful intro there. Unfortunately, all those incidents you figure have occurred in the last quarter century or so, and they need to, and what's just happened this January is something we need to address. For those of you who don't know me, as Liz said, I'm Dave Joyce, and I'm going to represent the 14th District of Ohio here in the House of Representatives. And today I see Shotstop as one of the speakers today that's in the district. It's amazing what the technology behind all these different ones you're going to hear about today, and the fact that unfortunately we have to use them, but fortunate that they're there and they're using their ingenuity to make these things happen and make us all safe. Before I came to Congress, I was a prosecutor for 25 years. So the safety of our communities back home, as well as here in the nation's capital, is something I care deeply about. The US Capitol is one of the most recognizable symbols of American democracy. It sort of broke my heart when I heard some foreigners talking about, you can't tell us what to do anymore after what we saw happen on January 6th. And that is sad, because let's face it, before COVID hit, 10,000 people a day were walking the halls on a daily basis. That's not to mention the 3 to 5 million people who travel from all over to visit the Capitol each year. Those horrific events on January 6th really stressed how imperative it is that we ensure the Capitol is safe, secure, and an open environment. The violence and chaos that erupted in and around the Capitol that day was both heartbreaking and infuriating. I'll be forever grateful for the officers who confronted the violence and lawlessness that day. It cannot go unsaid that not a single staffer, member of Congress, reporter, custodian, or anyone else who works within the complex was seriously injured. I also want to give a shout out to all those at home who managed to protect our safety when we have events at our own place. As unfortunately Liz had pointed out, Steve Scalise, had it happen while it was an innocent baseball practice by somebody who was stalking that baseball team for days before he acted out. And so you never know where it's going to occur. And so, my sheriffs, my police department, everybody in the district, God bless you all for what you do as well. But we need to do everything we can to ensure that the violence and destruction of January 6th can never happen again, including having conversations like these. The Capitol complex covers over 175,000 square feet and contains approximately 540 rooms, 658 windows, and 850 doorways. It doesn't matter how great our law enforcement officers are, that's a lot of potential vulnerability. Today, you'll hear about innovations in ballistics protection, impact-resistant panels, and bulletproof glass that can better secure the Capitol and provide safety for events and offices back in the districts. The team of experts speaking today will share some valuable information on how we can better protect ourselves, our colleagues, our staff, and all of those who contribute to the working to serve the American people. These experts are innovators, engineers, former military, and law enforcement, each with a different perspective on how we can ensure our safety. And I'm proud to say that some hail again from my district back in Northeast Ohio. So without further ado, I thank you all again for joining this critical discussion and turn it back over to Ms. Powell.
Thank you so much, Congressman. Really appreciate those remarks. Wanted to just show you this slide on some key news headlines from several different newspapers showing about the high cost of security. Another aspect that's important, safety number one, but we do need to consider the cost. And you can see $30 million worth of damages, according to the architect of the Capitol. $1 billion that has been spent thus far in DC security costs. Ohio, $1 million from the National Guard security detail in cost. Capitol fencing is $19 million through March. And we're continuing to spend this much money. And so it's just costing us so much money. And there are these tools that are much more affordable that we want to make sure people know about. So with that, we'll move to the next slide. And our first expert speaker is Regina Larkin.
Hi, I'm Regina Larkin. I'm a strategy director at ShotStop Ballistics here in Ohio. And I bring with me, about 9 years of corporate finance experience developing new product markets. In particular here, at ShotStop, looking at new ways to utilize our technology and use cases outside of our typical military and law enforcement markets. So I'm excited to kind of share with you the possible solutions here today. Now, after the events of January 6th, I'm sure that launched a broad assessment of the vulnerabilities on the Capitol and an assessment of the potential solutions for protecting it going forward. And I think that suite of solutions will include perimeter support, surveillance, electronic support, things of that nature. Today, we're going to focus on opportunities to protect the actual building and individuals, so legislators and staff members like yourselves. So I like to think about the levels of protection along two axes. The first being engagement level, and that ranges from passive to active engagement levels. So whether the user needs to activate their protection for it to be in place. The second axis here is protection type. So again, looking at personal protections and then building protections. How can we harden the Capitol building itself? So starting at the bottom left corner, passive personal protection. I think this is what most people think of when they think of ballistic protection or any type of armor, essentially, right? So it's what you see on Law and Order, it's what you see on our police officers every day. These are the vests that provide protection from handguns up to rifle-rated protections. Moving to the top left corner, we have active personal protection. And I think this is where things kind of get interesting and maybe useful to legislators and staff members like yourselves. There are a broad range of applications of ballistic protection materials that can be deployed on a person without you wearing a vest, right? So putting something in your briefcase, putting something in your purse, having a clipboard that you carry with you at all times provides with you some level of ballistic protection and comfort and safety day to day. So moving next to infrastructure protection, again, talking about the Capitol building itself, the first category is passive infrastructure protection. You have a lot of traditional products here, such as bulletproof glass, ballistic proof door panels. Looking at the footage from January 6th, we believe that there's some opportunity here to employ more of these measures, particularly on the glass side. We saw in the video how the intruders were able to just break through the glass and kind of enter the building that way. Having an impact-resistant material or glazing would provide additional security against those types of intruder attacks. And the fourth category here is active infrastructure protection. And I like to think of these as a second layer of defense once you're inside of the building. So something you can pull from a cabinet or you can fold out from a hidden place that either cuts off an entryway from an intruder and provides ballistic protection, or provides a little code for you to hide yourself and wait out until law enforcement arrives on the scene for protection. Now, one thing we want to keep in mind as we kind of think through these solutions, and my colleagues will kind of talk through them more in greater detail, is when you think about protecting a population like yourselves, you're non-tactically minded individuals. Our police officers and military folks have the benefit of having years of training and are better prepared for these types of situations. You want to think about how do you protect yourself in the worst case scenario when you've never been in this situation before and you're under attack, and you want a solution that's easy to deploy and provide you quick safety and allows you to protect yourself while you wait for law enforcement to arrive. So I'll pause there and hand it over to Will, who'll go into greater detail into the innovations.
Thanks, Regina, and good morning, everyone. My name is Will Franklin, and I am glad to speak with you today concerning physical safety as it relates to ballistic protection, or as it's perhaps more informally known, bulletproof technology, if you will. As to my background, I'm a retired U.S. Army Special Forces officer, and when I left the Army in 2012, our standard body armor technology in use at the time consisted of steel and ceramic plates. Now, as anyone who has done so can attest, running around at 130 degrees of dry heat's no fun when you're carrying around such things. So it was with great interest a few years ago, as an extension of my job as a defense contractor, that I became aware that there's new cutting edge technology out there in the field of plastics specifically. And I was in fact so impressed by what I saw, I became a body armor dealer. Now, these new innovations for body armor and other types of applications use polyethylene, which is a type of plastic, to achieve equivalent or even better levels of effectiveness. And these levels of effectiveness traditionally have only been achievable by steel or ceramics. And this has created a bit of a paradigm shift with regard to physical safety, whereas many solutions that were historically cost prohibitive or performance inhibitive now became feasible due to plastic technology. Or in other words, plastics have allowed us to up armor not just our own cells and our own bodies, but other things as well, things not previously feasible to harden. Now, when we think of bulletproof plastic, we think of something that's much lighter and less bulky than steel or ceramic solution, and it certainly is that. I'll add that one can achieve higher levels of protection typically with plastic at a lower cost as well. But there are other lesser known benefits of plastic that avoids problems inherent with steel or ceramic, and we have a few of them listed here on this slide. And these are important to understand as you implement solutions both at the building and campus level, but also at the individual level as well. So, for example, we have steel or metal here. Metal, of course, is heavy, and that's what we probably think of. But some of the problems with metal is it's prone to a condition called spalling. That just means that when something hits metal, it could be a bullet or fragmentation or a number of things moving at high speed. It can cause a fragment to chip off of that metal plate and fly away in the form of shrapnel and hit something else. In which case you didn't really solve your problem. You maybe protected one thing, but you just created a problem somewhere else. Metal also has a tendency to, because it's hard, it deflects things like bullets and other things, and that's good. The problem is it's a little too effective at that, with ricochets being a bit of a problem. And this has always been a problem with metal. Things hitting it will glance off and maybe hit something else that we don't want it to hit. And so that's why metal is kind of an issue. Ceramics have some of the similar problems and challenges of metal. They are typically somewhat heavy, maybe a little lighter, but they are more bulky to use and to employ. But probably the biggest problem is they're very prone to micro fracturing. So, you know, if it gets thrown into the back of a trunk or a locker or a truck, or you sit on it or drop it, it could cause a very small fracture inside the plate itself. And when that happens, the plate's integrity has been compromised and it may or may not work if it gets hit. Let's go to the next slide, please. Now, plastic does not have these problems and is a much safer and more effective solution in that regard. Sure, it's lighter and it's less bulky by quite a bit, but there's a very, very minimal risk of ricochets in plastic. And it also doesn't spall. It doesn't flake off when it's hit. And this is the nature of plastic, is that at its core, it's a softer material. So when things are moving at high speed and the impact with it, it acts as basically a sponge that grabs at these things and keeps them from moving around. So that doesn't just help you as an individual, but it helps the people next to you. And certainly if you're trying to improve your security hardening for a building or a room or things of that nature, this becomes very important because you don't want things bouncing off the walls and hitting other things that you don't want them to. And then, finally, the nature of plastic too is it doesn't microfracture, and even up to a certain protection level, it even float in water. So, not that I would recommend going swimming with it, but you could at least technically do so. Implementation is pretty easy with plastic due to its nature, even for the individual level. So for example, and Regina mentioned this in her portion earlier, but for example, a lightweight bulletproof plastic plate weighing only 1 pound at 1/4 of an inch thick, you can put in a laptop bag, use it as a clipboard, place it in a medium-sized purse, and it will stop most handgun bullets and virtually all fragmentation. And it's just as simple as slipping it in there. And it's a relatively low cost and almost no effort to do so. And at the end of the day, you have something on you that is a tool that is effective. And oftentimes when something bad happens, God forbid it does, seconds matter. And something that can give you more seconds goes a long way to increasing your survivability of those around you. Thank you. This concludes my portion. I will be followed by Mike Slate.
Thank you, Will. Hello, everybody. My name is Mike Slate. I'm the president of Slate Solutions. We design and manufacture body armor for law enforcement and the U.S. military. We're going to talk a little bit today about some of the applications of the technologies that Will and Regina just spoke about. So the material you see on the screen there is the polyethylene plastic ballistic material that we've been discussing this morning. It's a very high performing technology. It's fairly new to our industry, but in the world of armor, there's 3 main categories we try to focus on, and that's weight, price, performance. And when it comes to polyethylene, it's one of the best, if not the best option for weight and performance, and in a lot of circumstances, price. Some of the things you can see here on the screen, it's showing you the impact of a projectile against polyethylene, where you can see on those 3 images, it actually absorbs the projectile versus ricocheting. It's one of the benefits of a polyethylene material versus a steel, as Will just explained. Some of the other great features is the rigidity and the moldability of it. And because of that, it's used in a lot of different armor systems, from body armor to structures. One of the structures it's used in, based on some of the things that happened in 9/11, are aircraft doors. And you may see these today. The door separating the compartment to the pilots is actually made of a polyethylene material. And the reason that material is used in that application is really for weight. Next slide. And here, if you saw in the video, one of the things, with polyethylene, when you can mold it to different shapes, which is great for personal protection. It can, like Will said, it can be in a flat panel to go in bags in different scenarios. We also make curved plates, shapes for other types of protection. But beyond that, when it revolves around structures, it can also be molded from not just flat to curved panels. And the interesting part about that is, if you look in this image, you could simply mold this product to fit behind all those desks you see in the image, and nobody would know that they exist. They're thin, lightweight, and function and provide a lot of protection. And as we've been explaining, and you'll hear next, that when there is an incident, people tend to hide behind these desks just out of pure fear. Anybody with any training, it's a reaction. You hide behind something, you think it's going to give you protection from bullets. And the reality is, wood is not going to protect you from anything. You have to have some type of protection behind that will stop any threat, specifically these projectiles. So this polyethylene technology could apply to those wooden pillars you see there. It could be in the chairs. It could be in the doors, along with transparent armor for all the windows and all the doors the Congressman mentioned. All of those entry and exit points could actually be protective solutions. And those will be protecting people in a time of need without them having to think about it. So while we're waiting and, for law enforcement to come and protect, all of those areas could already have some level of protection to give additional seconds, like Will just mentioned a few minutes ago. So with that being said, again, polyethylene, a very high performing, very lightweight, cost-effective solution for both personal protection and for infrastructures like the Capitol and other buildings. And it's a great material to be used. And frankly, I feel it should be used in most structures to keep people safe. So with that being said, thank you for your time. Please be safe. I'll be now turning it over to Major Cody Bishop.
Thank you, Mr. Slate. Good afternoon, Major Cody Bishop. The Greenwood County Sheriff's Office. Have 19 years in law enforcement. 10 of those years were with the South Carolina Highway Patrol. The majority of my career has been in various narcotics enforcements, along with special weapons and tactics. I want to talk a little bit about this morning about the warrior mindset and ways to stay safe during a critical incident. Ms. Larkin, Mr. Franklin, Mr. Slate spoke earlier about ballistics and the latest and greatest innovations thereof. Mr. Slate just hit on the point of barriers, desks, chairs, walls, so on and so forth, being utilized for points of protection. Essentially, unballistic, structures essentially are nothing more than a grave, where people think that they actually have protection. It's better than nothing, I will say, but without some type of ballistic panel, it's essentially nothing but more than a grave. I'm in 100% agreement that quality equipment is an absolute necessity, but I'd like to take the equipment talk one step further and talk about training on the life-saving equipment in and of itself. Any one piece of equipment is only as good as the training of the individuals that would possibly utilize the equipment. People have to be properly trained on the equipment and understand how it works for it really to be effective in a life-saving crisis or effort. Staff has to be trained in critical incidents and fully understand how the human mind operates during times of extreme stress. Being scared can potentially save a person's life, but panic and chaos can and will in most cases be a devastating loss of life. Individually training and training in groups where people can be accompanied with quality equipment makes them confident. Confident equals success in all outcomes. Remaining calm under stress is not a normal behavior, and people often forget that. It has to be practiced, and it has to be practiced often. Normal, non-tactful minded working people need to have the understanding of three concepts that can potentially save life or someone else's life during a threat of violence. First is the identification of the threat itself. Second is knowing if the threat is being contained. And last, is there a resolution to the incident, such as equipment? The person is familiar with their equipment during a crisis. The normal everyday person doesn't have to be Rambo to survive a critical or stressful incident, but quality equipment and training is a prerequisite of survival. It's just like everyone on the panel said it earlier. Along with quality equipment, along with quality training, there's a confidence, and with that confidence is success. I mean, it's hard to lose. I thank you for the opportunity to being able to speak today. I'm going to turn it back over to Liz.
Thank you so much. All of you, just amazing insights that you've shared. Really appreciate your expertise. We've got a couple testimonials, and then we're going to close out with some questions. So please get ready to ask your questions. We've got our Q&A box there, and we are covering both Washington, D.C. and district offices. Some district offices have well, I actually know one example where the Capitol Police told us a couple of years ago that one office specifically wanted ballistic protections in their office. So I know that it's starting to happen, and it can happen. So anyway, here's a quote or a testimonial from a commander, Mark DePhillips. He's retired Marine Special Forces, sniper trainer, retired SWAT officer, and a firefighter. So clearly on the front lines on a regular basis, and you can read it yourself, but the gist is that he had spent his time in the field wearing soft armor that he wasn't even sure was going to save his life. In fact, he was 90% sure it wouldn't. He thought the bullets would just go right through him, but he just was hoping and praying he wouldn't get hit. And then years later, became a first responder and started to see that there were other tools out there. He was on a SWAT team and learned of this super thin, lightweight, as he called it, little thing piece of armor that he put on. He thought, no way, this is going to go right through it. And he tried it, tested it, and he saw that he was wrong. And he said, this little thin plate not only withstood my test rounds, but I shot all my bullets at it. Nothing went through. That's something I can wear every day and be 100% confident in its performance. So it really does matter for all of us, but especially those on the front lines. They really know. So the next testimonial real quick is from Sheriff Louderback from the National Sheriff's Association, also talking about the importance of these modern materials, these tools that we have, and plastic plates, and how he shot through them with such powerful ammunition at close range. And from that testing concluded, we now have a renewed confidence in the body armor that we wear and rely on daily. So clearly these tools are out there. Folks are starting to use them more and more. We want to bring them to you, to all of you who are working for members of Congress, whether you're in Washington or in a district or state office. The next slide, please. So before we close out with some final takeaways and then some Q&A, just wanted to share a couple other stories. So another one of the inventors of the super lightweight, ultra thin armor and boards actually got a call in the middle of the night from a police officer who said, you literally just saved my life. I was just shot at, and because I had your armor on, I'm still here talking to you. Gave a huge thank you and then said, I have one more favor to ask. And the inventor said, what? And he said, send me another plate. I need another piece of armor on me. So we have those stories. And I'll tell you a personal one as a mom of 3 kids. I actually carry my own ballistic board with me everywhere in my purse. And then I got extras for my kids and put it in their knapsacks. And I told them very simply, so I wouldn't scare them, but what it does. And when they wore it every day in their knapsack, and when summer came and they were going to camp, there's no reason for them to bring a knapsack. Each of them said, oh no, I'm bringing the knapsack. And I said, well, you don't need it. You just need a lunchbox. Yeah, but I want the knapsack because it's got this in it. So not only does it protect you, it makes you feel more protected. And I think that's really important to all of us. The other thing I wanted to reiterate is seconds matter. And just by using these tools, you can give yourself those precious extra seconds. So if you have it in your knapsack, for example, this personal board, which is not that expensive, by the way, you can run, and that gives you time to run. You've got protection as you run to get to the next place, for example. So these really are valuable tools, and it's like a fire extinguisher, right? You hope that you never have to use it, but it's there in case you need it. And that's what we want to make sure people understand today. You don't have to feel helpless. You can feel empowered to do something. And so it comes with not just the equipment, but with the training, as Major Bishop was talking about. And so we really want to encourage more training and understanding that you can have a plan, you can have the tools, and you can have a plan, and you can do something. So with this final slide, it sums up some action items that we're recommending for you all. Talking to the Sergeant at Arms about enabling the use of these tools, the House and Senate supply stores carrying these tools. It's very easy for them to do. Consulting experts, all of the folks that you've heard from today are available to you. We have a resources page where you can get information. We will send you these slides. We've been recording this, so you will have all of this fingertips. And then working with the architect of the Capitol and the Capitol Police to really invest in safety, making all those entrances bulletproof. There's no reason folks could have gotten in on January 6th if they had the right bullet resistant and just impact resistant material so that people could not barge in. Windows, that's insane that it was so easy to break into. We can have better windows. And we can preserve the Capitol, by the way. We understand it's historic. All of that can be preserved with this, this stronger, thin, lightweight material. So replacing windows, doors, entrances, and making sure staff can get these personal ballistic boards or inserts. I think those are super easy to do, very affordable. Every office should have them in their emergency bags that they've got in all the offices. And then training is very important. We've got to do training drills, just like we do fire drills. Many of us were raised with fire drills as kids. So we need to adapt that to today and do these kinds of drills as well. So hopefully that was helpful information. We would love to open it up to some questions from all of you. And I see there's some in the question box. Yes, you can have the PowerPoint presentation. We will make sure we send that to you. All the urgent need to act. Sorry, I'm reading the question. The need to be more proactive, not so reactive. That's absolutely a takeaway from today. Using drones as part of the effort. That's another good tool. That's very, very true. More and more law enforcement are using that. And we started off today with Congressman Dave Joyce from Ohio, and from his area of Ohio, they actually, Akron, the city of Akron has bought drones to help with their law enforcement efforts. So you're right, that's absolutely another tool. And would you include info about personal ballistic boards in the handouts? Yes, so we'll make sure. So if you go to that website, you can click there and get, go click the link to get a ballistic board. You also can talk to your supply store, whether you're the House or Senate side. That supply store is supposed to be providing you what you need. And the inserts that we talked about, it can also come as a clipboard. So you could actually use it as you go to meetings, as well as use it for protection. Do you have any recommendations for state houses? That's a great question for the group. So I would love to put that out to the group. What are your recommendations for making our state houses safer?
I can take that first, Will. I would say it's the same rules would apply for the structural armor applications, regardless of the building. The structural armor can be configured to fit any size and shape and location. So you have transparent armor for the windows, and then you have the armor flat panels for both doors and desks that can be used at any location.
Yeah, and I would add too, for the law enforcement personnel, managing entry access to your buildings, that if they don't already have a ballistic protection solution, I'd highly recommend looking into some options there. And I know I'm cynical. I like to err on the side of caution. I would look for things that protects you against rifle bullets. They're a lot harder to stop than pistol. Most of the soft armor out there is pretty much all pistol ammunition. So if you're, just in terms of a profile, and I can tell you that from my experience, overseas in combat zones, there were a lot of times we didn't get shot at just because we were presenting such a front that we were hard and not to be cracked. So there's something to be said for that. I mean, I understand too that from the civic engagement point of view, you want to have a certain familiarity and welcoming to the public and whatnot. I'm not sure we live in that time anymore. You kind of have to err on the side of caution. And for people who are going to be at the points of entry, they're going to be in the front lines if anything bad happens. And so they need to have my recommendation anyways, that they have the top of line protection. Then again, everything good costs money. So you'll have to consider that too, unfortunately.
Last thing I'd add there is that with the Capitol building and our state houses as well, they're obviously historic properties that you don't want to do anything that would disturb the facades and disrupt the beauty of those buildings. The ballistic solutions and even impact resistant materials that we see in the market today are more discreet, are something that you can lay behind a material and even retrofit a building without causing a huge disruption in the physical appearance or causing a huge amount of cost. So I think that's something that the industry is provided for. If that's something that's on your mind as well.
And just to add to that, since I'm someone who's walked both in Capitol Hill and state Capitol buildings, when you go to the Capitol building in DC, there is an extra entrance layer. So it's like an enclosed area with walls and there's windows. And then you go through another door before you go to the security check and you walk through that metal detector. The state capitals don't often have that. A lot of times it's just you walk right in and there you are. So you could put in a wall that is covered with ballistic protection and window with ballistic windows so that there's another barrier step before they're actually able to enter and rush it or do something harmful. So that's something that I have thought of just from my own experience of seeing both. But they're definitely, I'm not an expert though. These folks are the experts. So I would trust their opinion far more. But, another good question is, we talked about training and I really appreciate that from Major Bishop. Do you have recommendations on what would be the best sort of training that would be the ideal for these staff for public officials, and how often should they happen?
At minimum, my personal opinion would be quarterly. I think it should, include individual training as well as group training. It's really hard to say how often, how much, what is a proficient time. Being a member of SWAT member for a long time and an operator, you quickly realize, and just like I believe Mr. Franklin will tell you, all the training in the world sometimes goes out the window when there's critical incidences. So you have to have things to rely on other than formal training. An individual's mindset, number one, is it should always be played out on a day-to-day basis, scanning, looking. It's not paranoia. It's the times that we live in. So given a set time frame, the SWAT units we have now, we've got, federal standards and state standards for how often we have to train and what type of training that we do. I believe, honestly, if I'm 100% honest with the person answering that question, it lies on you. Don't rely on someone else to train you. Rely on yourself. Rely on your own mindset that things will and they can go bad. And what's your plan of survival? What's your means for escape? So put a lot of that responsibility back on yourself.
Do you know where people could get a training? Is there like an online class, or where would we go to get a training?
There's a lot of independent contractors that do training. There's a lot of stuff online that'll tell you different type of mindset, tactical and non-tactical training. Special weapons and tactics is one thing, and I don't think that's really what we're addressing here with the individuals working on the Hill. It's survivability. How do I survive? And that's knowing your environment, and most importantly, having things in that environment that will protect you, not wooden doors and concrete walls. Ballistics, armor.
Okay,
that's really helpful. I would add to what Cody's saying there, and what Liz, to get to your question about that too. Something as simple as establishing a building standard operating procedure for things, an SOP that people can remember, that's not too complicated, and if something happens, they know to execute it. Certainly creating some hardened areas inside of there that people can evacuate to for safety, for example, is one thing that comes to mind. And I think probably when it comes to training, your security force there, and I'm not that familiar with them, I'm sorry, but they should be part of the solution there at promoting it and have it be an integrated function. That way, everybody knows what the plan is, right? Not just some of it. That'd be my recommendation too. They can pick out some things that everybody can train on, and everybody understands the plan. And then if something happens, you just execute that plan.
And real briefly, to kind of go back to one of the first questions was ballistic. So we're kind of preaching, or we've reacted to what we're preaching. So all the units that I have now, crime scene, narcotics divisions, criminal investigators, we've outfitted all of our guys with plastics. It's a more user-friendly piece of equipment. The soft armor is kind of out the window in 2021. It's not protecting the type things that we're seeing. That's another point that I wanted to make is, even law enforcement, such as the County of Greenwood's using plastics for so many different reasons. It's just real important that whenever you've got people who's been wearing armor for their career, soft armor, whenever they move to hard plates, that they're trained properly, because it's worn a little different. And tactically speaking, you have to expose yourself to the threat a little differently than you normally would with soft armor. Sorry to go backwards, but I just want to make that point real quick.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people might be wondering what's the difference between soft and hard, and can these new plastic materials you're talking about really stop all bullets or just some bullets?
You know, I guess you coulda, shoulda, woulda, a lot of things. And I'm not here to want to speak on the specifications of the armor. I'll tell you this, I trust my life with the plastics. I trust my guy's life with the plastics. And we don't even have soft armor in our vehicles at all. It's not protecting us against the threats that we're seeing high velocity rounds on a daily basis.
I'd add that each of the products on the market today is rigorously tested to the standards of the National Institute of Justice. The NIJ sets the standards for testing ballistic material at each protection level. So one example of a protection level is handgun protection, right? So just a typical handgun round. The higher levels include armor-piercing rounds, rifle rounds. That's what you typically see in like the military and law enforcement spaces. But to answer your question, Liz, those products are tested to these standards, and any user or anyone that's interested in purchasing those products can go on the NIJ website and see which of those products have passed that testing, give you further comfort.
And I would also like to add the point that, we talk about pistol rounds and we talked about rifle rounds and so on and so forth. But as the technology in ballistic increases, so does the technology of weapon systems. I mean, we're seeing rifle rounds being shot out of pistols, out of handheld weapons. So, that's a FN57, for example, an extremely fast string bullet that no soft armor on the planet's going to stop. It better be hard.
I see we're coming up towards the end. How about final takeaways that you want everyone to understand after today?
Okay. So I think I'm unique as a panelist in that I am not in law enforcement or in military. I am a non-tactically minded individual. And I would say one takeaway I want you to have in mind is that the industry has moved far away from what you would typically think of as bulletproof materials, right? It's no longer these heavy steel doors or these bulky vests. It's really lightweight, concealable, discreet piece of armor that you carry on your person or that could be installed in your property. So I would say definitely look into it. You'll be surprised by the universe of solutions available.
Yeah, I'll add to everyone that we've talked about some tools and some technology today. Always remember that when it comes to these things, the most important tool you have available is your mind, that thing between your ears. A little protection goes a long way. If I have a plan to execute, if I have a tool that can help me execute that plan, I am leaps and bounds beyond having nothing. Because the last thing you want to do when you're under duress is to have to think. Because time just doesn't work the same way when you're under duress. You want to execute a plan you've already learned and use tools you've already had.
Yeah, and I would add, why not? If you can have something to save your life or potentially save your life, why not? I mean, armor has come a long way, like Regina said, and it's available to everybody. It's meant to save lives, and everybody should have access to that in every structure or environment you're in. So no different than the fire extinguisher example.
Just in closing, it's kind of hard to follow those two guys, who's innovators in this type of technology. But from just a simple man from South Carolina, I would kind of resort it in layman's terms. Whenever you're provided the books in school, you're provided the equipment, you study hard, you're successful, you're confident. It's no way. It's no different in survivability. It's your responsibility to protect yourself. Getting the equipment only makes you that much more confident, only makes you that much more liable to withstand a critical incident. So train yourself and push for the best equipment that money can buy.
Thank you all so much. So valuable. I did see one last question on active shooter training. And so since we're getting a lot of questions on training and sort of what do we do next with this, We will see what we'll follow up with you. Definitely, you'll get the link to this recording. You'll get the slides, but we also will work to get you more information on that exact question of how do you get training and what we can do to make sure you have what you need. So, you know, and maybe we do another briefing to drill that down further. So please let us know if you think of other questions. You've got Andrea and my email. We want to help you. We want this place to be safer for all of us. So please let us know. And thank you so much again for dialing into today's congressional briefing on safety, on making all of us safer. We know we can get there. So we've got the tools, we've got the knowledge, we can do this. So thank you again. I think we'll close out with that. Have a good afternoon.